law enforcement officials in the state committed murder and that they're covering it up. Why would they want to be involved in this?
Because he's dead. I think things went too far. It was late. There was alcohol involved, but they're all family.
Said it feels we're the only ones fighting for the truth of what happened to John O'Keefe. And me and my family and my attorneys and my team have marshaled every resource to get to the truth. It just feels like no one else wants it.
Okay, just to be clear, you didn't do it.
We know who did it, Steve. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know.
Yes, we do.
And no, she didn't do it. No, she didn't do it. This is an innocent woman. She didn't do it.
I tried to save his life.
Yeah.
I tried to save his life at 6 in the morning. I was covered in his blood. I was the only one trying to save his life.
Why'd you admit to it?
She didn't admit to it. She didn't admit to anything close to that. Nothing close to that. And you should know that.
That was like 3 or 4 times she admitted to it.
No, she didn't.
That's not true.
She asked a question. She asked a question, which is very different. She didn't admit to anything.
Let's go.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay, how is everybody? Wanted to talk to you about the explosive, fascinating hearing yesterday in the case against Karen Reed. If you don't know, if you've been living under a rock, Karen Reed is accused of second-degree murder of her boyfriend, police officer John O'Keefe, in Canton, Mass. On January 29th, 2022. According to prosecutors, she hit him with her car after a night of drinks, leaving him to die in the snow. And without talking too much about it, I really want to get into the hearing. I thought it was a very bad day for the defense. Even my boyfriend, who disagrees with me on this case, is starting to reconsider and walk back his opinion. Terrible day for the defense. They didn't file the third, I don't know if I have this correct, third party. Basically, he says he didn't say walk back. He's just reconsidering. He hasn't fully walked back, but he is reconsidering his opinion on this case. No filing as to, hold on one second. No filing as to accusing anyone else in this case. And I'm going to get right into it. Really shocking. And the defense, in my view, I made a tweet about this, looked to me like they had put all their eggs in this pre-trial, what I'd describe, my view, and I can change my mind. If the facts are something different in court next week, the trial starts next week, next Tuesday, I will be the first one to stand up and say I was wrong. I have changed my mind on so many true crime cases. In fact, if you haven't caught wind of it, this channel and my whole podcast is really about how people change their minds, and really fascinated because I changed my mind on so much during my whole entire life. So thought this was very interesting. I thought they'd thrown their eggs totally in what I called the innocence fraud campaign basket and didn't have much left even in ways of preparation for court with this very important thing. And in the beginning of the hearing, we hear the defense say, oh, it's not our job to present a theory or solve the case. And I think that's a losing argument. So let's get into it. Let's look at the hearing. And they also played a very damning tape of Karen Reed saying, oh, you're all in on the joke. And she's changed her story so much. We'll look at that too. And made so many damning statements. I'm wondering if they're expecting to lose in court and go forward with this innocence campaign after conviction and onward. And if it's going to just be fought for years and years, because this, what I see as the defense looking very comfortable arguing outside of court and not very comfortable arguing in court within the confines of our laws. And that to me looks like a red flag, along with, I mean, if you paid attention to the opening, and you can see Karen Reed when she's challenged and said, you know, she almost has like a feral look, like a dog ready to strike for a second there. Very annoyed at being challenged. Interesting. She does not come off well in court. I've seen almost every emotion from her, but remorse or sadness over John O'Keefe's death. It's very odd. And also interesting to note, in one of the legal filings, they have distanced themselves from Turtle Boy, who is the #1 fan, former friend of Karen Reed's. He has his own channel, YouTube channel, and he's facing his own charges for harassing witnesses in this case. So let's take a look at the hearing.
With the Commonwealth.
Adam Lally for the Commonwealth. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Mr. Lally.
Good morning, Your Honor. Laura McLaughlin for the Commonwealth.
Good morning, Ms. McLaughlin.
Good morning, Your Honor. Alan Jackson on behalf of Ms. Reed.
Good morning, Mr. Jackson.
Good morning, Elizabeth Little, also on behalf of Ms. Reed.
Good morning, Ms. Little.
Good morning, Your Honor. David Yannetti for Karen Reed.
Good morning, Mr. Yannetti. Good morning, Ms. Reed. All right, so to begin, and I have all the motions in limine. I'll talk about how exactly we'll go through them in a minute. But first, so in reviewing the motions in limine, I mean, clearly the defendant has an absolute right, a constitutional right, to present a third-party culprit.
So a third-party culprit, there we go. The defense did not even prepare that. But what's a motion in limine? So a motion in limine is basically a motion to exclude evidence. And so we heard these kinds of arguments on both sides yesterday. And I can just tell you how I see it from someone who's watched a lot of trials. I covered the Ghislaine Maxwell trial from the courthouse, Larry Ray trial, all of the NXIVM hearings, pretty much, and the Keith Raniere trial, as well as a lot of sentencing. So this is what I see. I see a really defense, not a winning day for the defense here. And we also heard about this FBI report, which was, I think there must be some connection on Karen Reed's defense side. This is just me speculating. And the FBI, they got someone to look into it, but the FBI looks like they agree with the cause of death. The part they don't agree was to the back of John O'Keefe's head, which the state says we weren't even arguing about. So a lot of things have been presented to the public that seem to be untrue. That's the best way to put it.
Defense, but counsel is well aware that that is not without limit, right, from the case law. Now, the defendant has stood here, defense counsel has stood in this court repeatedly stood here and in other venues and in their pleadings espousing various third-party culprit theories or scenarios. But now that it's time to actually try the case in the courtroom, I don't have a motion from the defense to admit third-party culprit testimony. So, and as you're well aware, I have to make findings before any mention of any third-party culprit evidence or even an opening goes before the jurors. In order to admit it, given that I have no information at all, I don't know who the third-party culprit is, even after reading 4,500 pages of discovery. I don't know what motive a third-party culprit might have. I don't know how it's relevant. I don't know if it's remote or if it's current. I don't know if it's speculative.
So there's the judge saying, you've argued this in court, that all these different theories concerning third parties and other venues. And you have to remember, there are no laws for perjury in other venues. You can lie, meaning on YouTube. You can do all sorts of things. If you're Karen Reed, it's a little trickier, which makes people like Turtle Boy so much more important to you. They can say things without it being pulled into court as evidence. Not so much Karen Reed. But you can make all these claims. Now that it's time for you to make your appeal in court, where is it? And where's the motivation? So thank you, Shari Davis, for sending me that video. I did watch it, and I see a lot of claims about who knows who, but not a lot of motivation and how it happens. And just to inform everybody about the dog bite, the dog is out. That was at the last hearing. No dog DNA would be argued, meaning we couldn't find any dog DNA. We're not going to argue that John O'Keefe was bit by a dog. So some of the theories pulled out was that he went into the home of his friends that night. There was a massive fight. They're all police officers. They're all protecting each other. He was bit by a dog, beaten up for some unknown reason. All the people in the home are happy to have watched other people in the home drag him out of the house, leave him to die in the snow, really in a really inhumane and cruel way, and are all blaming it on Karen Reed. Why? Because it's all a big conspiracy against Karen Reed. No one likes Karen Reed. And you'll hear in a tape that Karen Reed is saying that we're all in on the joke. She even made claims that she watched men bash John O'Keefe into her taillight. It's getting quite wild.
Or if it's relevant, I don't know if it will prejudice or confuse the jury. And if it's hearsay, I have a whole other series of factors I have to consider. So, Mr. Yannetti, are you pursuing a third-party culprit defense?
We are, Your Honor, and I'm prepared to address that. The Commonwealth has raised the issue, and I am prepared to address that today.
So you filed your motions first, and you did not raise it. So if the Commonwealth had not raised it, you did not move to introduce it, correct? I have no motion from
No, I
from
understand.
you about it.
I understand, Your Honor. If you'd like something in writing for us, we can do that. I have a full argument prepared.
All right, so who is the third-party culprit?
We are under no obligation to name any specific third-party culprit.
How am I supposed? So you're prepared to argue all this?
I'm prepared to argue it, Judge.
All right, so we will get to that when we get to the Commonwealth's motion.
That's fine.
Now, the second thing I want to address, because again, it's...
So I thought that was one of the more interesting parts. A lot of matching DNA from the state. The hearing went over 2.5 hours altogether. So it went 2 and something hours. Then they took a break and they came back and this tape was played. But before I play that tape, I just want to show you some of Karen Reed's own statements. Hold on one sec. So John is dead. Okay, John is dead before he was found. I hit him. Now Karen Reed says, did I? She refutes this, that she says this. The police officer said, she said it without did I and a question mark. She refutes that. And you saw in the opening, it was a tragic accident. I only had 4 drinks. I don't believe the Commonwealth is saying I wasn't in my right mind. That, I believe, is from the Nightline interview or Dateline interview. I believe it's Nightline. I dropped him off and made a 3-point turn. I dropped him off, looked down at my phone, and saw him at the door, which I find so interesting. As I've said before, I've had cab drivers drop me off in front of my apartment, and they'll watch me go into the door to just make sure I got home safe. This is a man she says she loved. And at the crucial moment, she's looking down at her phone. At what on her phone? She's not saying. It's just kind of a vague glance down at the phone. I never made a 3-point turn. Okay, whoops, I'm going backwards. What I thought could have happened was, did I incapacitate him unwillingly and in his drunkenness passed out? It's not possible that I hit John unwittingly. I dropped him off. He ran up to the house and entered through the door of the breezeway. I've marshaled every resource to get to the truth. You saw that in the opening. John apologized profusely after our vacation argument, where I had said F you to his friend who hugged him at the bottom of the elevator. John did not come back to the room that night. John never stayed out all night without me. I was the only one trying to save John's life. Saw that in the opening. I last saw John at the waterfall. Colin and Brian Albert beat John. My taillight is smashed and John's head was pulverized. That's what you'll hear on this very damning tape. I said I hit him. It was preceded by a did, and it was preceded by a did and proceeded by a question mark. This is my fault. I can't believe this happened. Brian Higgins killed John. Now that's someone she's accused of kissing. So according to John O'Keefe's, the children in the home that he was taking care of, they were on the outs, that on the 28th, he had asked Karen Reed to leave the home and she wouldn't, and he left. So lot of conflicting statements, or consistent statements that they were not having a easy time as far as their relationship. But let's get into that tape. Terrible for the defense, I thought. Shocking and alarming.
Back on the record on the Karen Reed matter.
Okay, so
this is after they took a break, and this is when this little bit of tape was shown from the night that Karen Reed was arrested.
Good afternoon, counsel. Good afternoon, Ms. Gilman. I appreciate you being here. Before we see this video, just briefly, I just want to say that there were really only 2 motions that I'm comfortable with deciding by the 2 o'clock call here. Commonwealth's motion in limine of intent to obtain Corey. I don't know if I already allowed that, but that's allowed. And the Commonwealth's motion eliminate, Jim, I think this is 317. Commonwealth's motion eliminate to prohibit reference to any federal investigations conducted by the U.S. Attorney's Office or FBI. So that will come into evidence the way that it typically does here in Massachusetts. You can question as to a date where the statement was made under oath, and we can discuss it as it gets closer in more detail. So the other motions are under advisement. We'll talk about that when we come back to sort of housekeeping matters at the end of the day. So
this great FBI investigation that Karen Reed supporters had really hoped on really sounds like, just by this hearing, now we don't know, it just sounds like it's a big dud for the defense. And anytime you have that argument, now, of course, the state just presents a theory. So anytime you have that argument, we don't have to show the jury really what happened. We don't have to have a consistent theory. We just have to poke holes in the state's case. It's very unsatisfactory for the jury. And I think when you have a theory such as the defense has put out in the public domain that's so complicated and so unlikely, I just think it's going to be a really hard sell for the jury. I feel, if I had to guess, I feel like the defense is basically saying we're going to do our best at trial, but I don't think they have high hopes for winning this case. That was just my impression. And I think that I would be very surprised if Karen Reed doesn't get convicted, and after her conviction that this innocence campaign isn't really revved up. And of course, there's a lot of money in these innocence campaigns, from the YouTube money, from the Netflix deals. I know Turtle Boy, it's been reported, has been in conversation with Netflix. I know that one of our main stations here is planning to release a big Karen Reed special after the jury verdict. So all of the media, and certainly it's a much more interesting story, wrong woman convicted than right woman convicted. So if you've been following my channel, I talk about innocence fraud a lot here, and it's huge business, big business. And she's got a lot of money and a lot of money to spend on really good lawyers. I don't think it will be enough to stave off a conviction in this case, but let's see. This is just from listening to the hearings, reading what I've read online, looking at some of the court documents. Of course, the filings are huge. I have not gone through all of them.
Do you have that video all pulled up, Mr. Lally, for me to see?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
And, Your Honor, for the record, it's a little bit lengthy as far as the entirety of the video. The portion that I would be submitting to the court is from 7 minutes and 4 seconds until 9 minutes and 55 seconds.
Okay. Can we? Thank you.
So we locked up the house. The back door, we just did the knock lock.
Okay. Can you explain to me what the process is right now?
Absolutely. So you're going to be booked just like last time. Go through the same process. It's going to be a little less time consuming because we're not going to do major case prints because we did those last time. Once you're booked and you go through this portion of it, we'll let you make a phone call just like last time. We'll make a phone call. Your parents will be able to bring you whatever other additional need, things that you need.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow morning, You'll go and be arraigned at Norfolk Superior Court on the charges that were. I'm sure you'll go over the charges again with you on the warrant.
But I'm on bail, so how can I be spending the night here again?
All right, so I'll explain that portion to you, as long as it's not going to interfere with you. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for Ramsey.
Okay. So initially, your arrest was on probable cause out of the district court. Okay. So the charges you were arrested on initially were out of district court, out of Stoughton District. That's where the arraignment was. It was district level charges. Today, grand jury indicted you on these charges, which is second-degree murder, vehicular homicide, and leaving the scene of a death. Okay? So those are the charges that grand jury indicted you on. So now you're being charged and will be arraigned in Superior Court, Norfolk County Superior Court in Debra. Okay?
So the bail doesn't apply anymore?
Typically, I'm not, so we don't set the bail. But typically, once murder comes into play, people don't get bailed out.
So it's not manslaughter anymore, is that the difference?
That's correct. It's a higher degree of taking a life. Okay, so.
Right. So this is the second time she's getting higher charges. Second time she's been dealing with the police. She's out on bail. And we don't know that she is on bail. We've seen her come and go from the court. So we know she got bail a second time.
That's the charges that you're being charged with now. And you were indicted by grand jury.
Okay, you're aware he was beaten up by Brian Calm Albert. I mean, we're all in on the same joke, right? My tail.
Thanks so much, Mary B. I appreciate it. So here comes the super damning statement by Karen Reed here.
Leg was cracked and Jockin was pulverized.
Okay, you need to.
Let's go back and listen to that again because I talked right through that. Hold on one second.
By Brian Calm Albert. I mean, we're all in on the same joke, right? My tail leg was cracked and Jockin was pulverized.
Okay, you need to abide by the rights that were afforded to you. Okay, so you can talk if you want. If you want to tell us what happened, that's fine. We'll listen, but you were ready to your rights, okay? And I'm sure he's going to do it again. All right. If you want to talk to us, you want to give us a story, definitely. We'll take it.
No, I mean, I know you already know the story, so I don't need to.
All right. How long is the entire tape?
So that is Trooper Pye, who was the arresting officer from the barracks. So it goes, I believe, at least 90 minutes or so.
All right. Do you have the entire, we're not playing it now, but do you have the entire video? All right. I would like it marked for identification. Sure. I'd also like a copy of it so I can view the whole entire thing, put it all in context. I never like to see just sections. Sure. Can I get that for the weekend as well?
Oh, absolutely. And for the record, as far as I think a lot of that sort of preliminary stuff was more meant as context for the court. You know, there's certain discussions about court procedure and things that I don't think should be put in front of the jury.
All right. So that was my concern as well.
So Tuesday, jury selection starts. I have a feeling, and they're not in court on Fridays. So I have a feeling that this is not really going to heat up, if I had to guess, to the week after next. I mean, or not next week, but the week after. Is that right? Did I say that right? I hope so. And I don't know if they're going to be covering online or broadcasting jury deliberations. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It looks like I would guess not. So it will be a very, very interesting trial. But let's look also. Excellent reporting here. So interesting. Wait, hold on one second. So I just wanted to show you Grant Smith Ellis on X, formerly known as Twitter, had an excellent post today. New overnight, yesterday, prosecutors trying the case of accused murderer Karen Read as to the lonesome death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe confirmed that a federal expert now backs up a finding that John died from injuries unrelated to a fight. So that's key to the defense. It's refuting the defense. And this is the federal report that has really been the holy grail of the Karen Read supporters, aka John was hit by Karen's car. At Friday's pretrial hearing, in a shocking moment that left legal observers stunned, Read's defense team simply failed to file a motion to present a third-party defense at trial, which begins on Tuesday, April 16th. With jury selection, read more here with a link to another one of his posts. Said legal analyst Philip C. Dube, normally a critic of the Commonwealth, speaking on social media, quote, Karen Read's trial counsel did not file a motion stating their intent to blame a third party for John O'Keefe's killing, merely showing that someone had a motive or opportunity to kill him is legally insufficient. It's too speculative. They need actual corroboration. Further evidence revealed on Friday's pretrial hearing showed that a video exists of Karen Read's taillight in a cracked state as early as 8:28 a.m. on the morning of January 29, 2022, therein entirely exposing Read's fake theory of the taillight being broken later by the police. That evidence, coupled with all the previous evidence that Read was DUIing when she got into a fight with John, about Karen having cheated on John with a federal agent in John's home merely weeks before the murder, and then in anger backed up her car, left John for dead, came back to the scene around 5 a.m., saw the body, had a meltdown, and then started a year-long campaign to smear witnesses in the lead up to the trial. A Judge Canyon said Friday, quote, defense counsel has stood in this court multiple times and in other venues and advanced various third parties' theories, we just heard this, or scenarios, but now that it is time to try the case in the courtroom, I don't have any motion from the defense for such a defense. So, like I said, bad hearing for the defense. Let's see what they have at trial. It may all change at trial. She's got what looks like a very expensive defense team. We don't know. And should I see some kind of great new evidence and a really cohesive theory that explains motive. I think motive is important in this case. And I also heard, I think this was a video Shari Davis sent me, where they were saying that the state has, I think they said, changed their theory. And I think that the state does, not being clairvoyant. So meaning as the evidence comes in, their theory develops. And of course, the state can be wrong about their theory. The jury doesn't have to totally accept the defense or the prosecution's theory for that matter, only that the person did or did not do it in our courts. So as new forensic, and there's a lot of forensic evidence in this case. Someone was tweeting at me that it's going to be all about the autopsy. Let's see. And I certainly think they're right. That is a really important part of this case. But I thought this was also really interesting. Is this Court TV? Did a little special on the campaign, and they interviewed some of Karen Reed's supporters. So I thought we'd take a look at it. So there have been allegations that they have put out ads to pay people to protest in front of the court. I do think she does have real supporters. I'm not denying that, but certainly there have been allegations. I haven't seen the ads myself, that ads were put to show up at court to protest. And I think that, like I've said, the idea was to put so much pressure on our courts and the Commonwealth to just either drop the case or the judge to throw out the case. And we like to think that our courts work in a vacuum, but unfortunately they don't. They are susceptible to public pressure. So that's an interesting thing, that how long does it take to die in the cold, or how, H-O-S, house. There's a typo there. And that's, of course, Jennifer McCabe, who made that Google search. Now, the defense says it was made 2-something in the morning, and the state says it was made that she opened up her browser at 2 in the morning, but that the search wasn't made till 6-something in the morning. And that's also going to be very interesting Cellbrite testimony that we have to look forward to. So.
Free Karen Reed! Free Karen Reed! Free Karen Reed!
Karen Reed's pretrial hearings have looked a lot like Johnny Depp's fan-filled crowds at his civil trial.
And I think that so Johnny Depp spent a lot of money on a campaign ahead of his trial, during his trial, to change public opinion. I've made many videos about the Depp versus Heard trial, my opinion on it. And I think that they don't just follow one campaign, but they look at all the innocence campaigns that have happened, and they learn things from them. So I think it's very interesting that they have shifted blame from person to person. They've accused a lot of different people of doing this crime. And it's interesting that some Karen Reed supporters would say, my issue is with the state. I would call it developing their theory, but they would say changing their story or changing their theory. But I don't think it's changed in any dramatic way. It's always been that Karen Reed is the culprit here.
Her supporters always show up to cheer and protest at the courthouse, even in the cold weather.
Every day we see the way the corruption is with the police just framing people, and it's important to be out here no matter how cold we are.
Everybody.
So they'll say that. So they'll say the police frame people. This is a case of police corruption, but they'll never say how, and they won't say who's been framed, how it happened. And you know that our press is so anti-police. They love running with that story. And if you don't believe me, there was even a big movement to defund the police. And sometimes it worked, and it really suffered in those areas where they were defunded. Those areas really suffered, usually poor areas that really need police.
That is out here in the cold, and majority of inside the courtroom is here to support Karen and find justice for John. And the only way to find justice for John is to find the real killers of John O'Keefe.
The case has spilled from the courtroom and onto the streets. It has divided the Massachusetts community into the Free Karen Reed camp and those who believe that she murdered her boyfriend.
This case has divided the town. It has divided the town significantly. Every family is impacted. Every family. And there's ways I can't even tell you.
Last year, crowds in support of Karen Reed protested in front of the Canton police station and at homes and businesses of people they believe are actually responsible for John O'Keefe's murder.
So this campaign is appealing for people who have had issues with the police, who don't like the police, who don't like big government. And it also appeals to people because it's exciting. When you have campaigns like this, you're not really beholden to the known facts in the case. You can go all sorts of different directions. You're really only limited by your imagination as to concoct or creating a really compelling story. So it's exciting. For the people who believe Karen Reed is guilty, it can only go one way, right? Karen Reed can be convicted, but there's a lot of exciting things that could happen on her side. She could get convicted, break out. The case could get tossed. And there have been actually, arrests of her, notably Turtle Boy, his name is Kearney, Aiden Kearney, her number one supporter who was friends with Karen Reed. He's been arrested twice for intimidating witnesses, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, if it's only once, but my memory is of twice. Let me know if I'm wrong on that. Double check that fact.
The district attorney, Michael Morrissey, issued a video warning in August 2023.
The harassment of witnesses in the murder prosecution of Karen Reed is absolutely baseless. It should be an outrage to any decent person, and it needs to stop. Innuendo is not evidence. False narratives are not evidence.
In October, Aiden Kearney, a blogger known as...
So it was pretty interesting. In the hearing yesterday, they accused the police of harassing Karen Reed supporters. And one moment in the hearing, pretty interesting. And not unusual for these kind of campaigns to reverse things. So the accused murderer is now the victim, and usually the victim is forgotten altogether, if only remembered as a hashtag. So they like to take the Justice for John O'Keefe hashtag as a way to kind of really take it away from the other side and claim it as their own.
Turtle Boy, who has led many of the protests, was charged with intimidating witnesses. Then in March, prosecutors asked the court for a 500-foot buffer zone to keep the protesters away from the courthouse during the trial. Protesters allege the Commonwealth is trying to deny their First Amendment rights. In her ruling, Judge Beverly Cannon recognized the constitutional right of the people to peacefully protest. But she wrote the protesters have shouted at witnesses and confronted family members of the victim, and have also taken...
So this is really sad to me and unacceptable. Can you imagine going through something as horrible as losing your loved one to a murder and then have to be booed at and harassed? And the fact that Karen Reed has not called off the dogs and said, don't do this, or her legal team, and is instead turning the tables and accusing the police of harassment, I find really reprehensible. Thanks, Elway Broughton. Love your channel, Roberta. West Memphis 3 coverage got me hooked. Have you followed the Apple River case? I did follow some of it. I thought it was fascinating. Of Nick Mew, interested in your thoughts. Well, yeah, I know a lot of people thought he was innocent in that case. I wasn't one of them. I didn't think that they made a very good case just by the video evidence. I thought he was terrible on the stand. I thought the defense team was very good, and they had a lot of very successful cross-examinations, but ultimately I thought the prosecutor's rebuttal was excellent. And it's really hard to claim self-defense when you're not making a step back and you're always moving forward. And I thought they proved that he struck first. But I know that he has his supporters. And that's what I saw of the trial. I didn't watch all of it, but I watched a lot of it. And I was fascinated. I think he's a really dangerous, Nicholas Mew, a really dangerous person. And it looked like when he was convicted, it had that look that look that so many of these accused murderers have, like, it was a good run. We tried. We tried, but not surprised that he was convicted and not angry about it, kind of resigned himself to it. That was my take. I may be wrong. That was my take on it.
Displaying material.
I mean, just my feel about his attitude. I could be wrong on that.
Materials that may or may not be introduced into evidence. And so, citing Karen Reed's Sixth Amendment right to a fair trial, she ruled that there should be a 200-foot buffer zone and that no one should wear anything related to the case inside the courthouse.
So we locked up the house. The back door, we just did the...
So here's the tape we just saw. So that's almost everything I have today. But just like I do in the Dan Markel case, wanted to share with you an article that just came out in, I believe it's Boston Magazine. And it's titled, Remembering the Real Victim in the Karen Reed Case, My Friend John O'Keefe. And this is by Tara Kerrigan. And it reads, Karen Reed, the Massachusetts woman accused of killing her Boston police officer boyfriend, excuse me, I'm losing my breath, has been painted as a scapegoat, a symbol, and a true crime celebrity. And I think that's something that's really strange, and it seems to be a tradition that goes all the way back to Sacco and Vanzetti, and maybe even before, that we make a lot of these accused and convicted murderer celebrities and symbols, often symbols, speaking of the West Memphis 3, often symbols of things bigger than the case. So the West Memphis 3 became symbols of the outcasts, small people up against the power of the state. That's so often the narrative. It's the narrative here, even though Karen Reed seems to be quite well off. But what about the man who died and the people closest to him? So there she is, for those watching on YouTube, Tara Kerrigan, and she has a pin that reads Justice for JJ, and she's holding a picture of John O'Keefe, looking down. My phone was still on silent when I woke up the morning of January 30th, 2022, to 4 missed calls and a text from a friend that read, "Call me when you get up. I think something happened to John." I dialed her number. "John who?" I asked as soon as she answered. "You're John. John O'Keefe," she said, explaining that she had seen a tribute to John on Facebook that indicated he had passed away. While technically my ex-boyfriend, John was so much more than that. We met in 2001 and had a big love that evolved into a friendship spanning more than 20 years. We had seen each other through some hard times. We had a special connection. I immediately hung up and called John's cell. I knew he would answer, explain the mix-up, and we'd laugh about it. At least that's what I told myself. But John didn't answer. Instead, the phone went straight to voicemail. I tried him again. Voicemail. I learned later that John's brother, Paul, had been awakened the previous morning by a call from their mother relaying that John had been found in a snowbank. Paul was the first to arrive at the hospital, where he sat for 45 minutes alone while doctors tried to warm John up. When his parents arrived, all three were escorted into a small room by a hospital employee and waited for a doctor and nurse to come in. They were still wearing masks, Paul told me, but I could tell by the look in their eyes. While the nightmare began differently for each of John's loved ones, it ended the same for all of us. He was gone. John's wake was an emotionally agonizing yet poignant tribute to a man defined by his deeds and a life rich with purpose. As a parent and a 16-year-old veteran of the Boston Police Department, given the magnitude of the turnout, the gathering was held inside the Church of St. Francis of Assisi in his hometown of Braintree. More than 1,000 people waited patiently in the biting rawness of that frosty February day to pay their respects. Officers from across the country, wearing pristine uniforms and expressions of devastation, formed a procession led by a Boston mayor, Michelle Wu. As I inched closer towards the blue coffin, my trembling legs turned to lead. I was not ready to face this reality, the finality of this moment with John. Adorned in his police uniform, he was as startlingly handsome in death as he had been in life. If the wake felt like floating through a bad dream, the funeral the next day proved even more surreal. Among the parishioners, a distant cluster of faces were painfully familiar. We shared nods of camaraderie from across the pews. We had been here before. In 2013, John had lost his beloved sister, Kristen, to a brain tumor, followed by the suicide of his close friend and his fellow officer just 8 days later. 2 months after that, his sister's husband died of a heart attack. As the procession approached, memories of the prior funerals came rushing back to me. I recalled standing at the end of the pew, as I did now, when John reached out to squeeze my hand. Now it was John in the coffin, which happened to pause right in front of me for the draping of the pall. After the death of his sister and brother-in-law, John made the selfless decision to abandon the familiar bachelor life he had known to embrace the role of a single parent to his 6-year-old niece and 3-year-old nephew. He traded the city for suburban life in Canton and transferred to a safer position for the sake of the children who had already lost so much. The children bestowed upon John the endearing nickname JJ and renewed his sense of hope when life seemed too bleak to carry on. It would be these children who would lose a third parent on the night John died. During the service, Paul remembered his brother in a moving eulogy that evoked laughter and tears. He spoke of their childhood, their closeness, and how John never left their sister Kristen's side during her battle with cancer, praising John for providing a home full of love for her children. He concluded with the haunting words, quote, "We'll take it from here," unquote. Those were the very same words John said when he eulogized his sister 9 years prior. One of the most touching tributes that day was when hundreds of strangers, with their hands on their hearts and blue ribbons affixed to their clothing, lined the sidewalks along the funeral route from St. Francis Church to the Blue Hill Cemetery in a demonstration of sorrow and solidarity with John's family. As we basked in the outpouring of kindness, none of us could have foreseen that John's parents had their last surviving child, Paul, were on the verge of being sucked into a toxic, conspiracy-fueled drama that would steal the solace they had found in the early days of their loss. Just a week before the funeral, prosecutors had charged John's girlfriend, Karen Reed, with vehicular homicide and manslaughter, later changing the charges to second-degree murder. Investigators concluded that she was intoxicated when she backed over John with her car after dropping him off at a late-night gathering, and then left him to die in the cold. His family also believed that Reed was to blame. What John's family considered to be an open and shut case, though, was about to become anything but. In September 2022, Los Angeles-based criminal defense attorney Alan Jackson, who defended Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein in SA cases and is known for his flair in the courtroom, joined Reed's legal team. I sat with John's family and friends in disbelief as Jackson transformed hearings into what felt like the set of a Hollywood whodunit. Arguing that Reed was framed, he told of extravagant theories that I and John's family believe directly contradicted the facts of the case. Still, the worst was yet to unfold outside the courtroom walls. A case that rightfully belonged within the confines of the legal system was soon converted into what felt to me and John's family like an unofficial and unregulated trial playing out in the streets. After a blogger named Aidan Kearney, aka Turtle Boy, began to write about the case, maintaining that Reed was innocent and being framed, large numbers of his readers showed up alongside him at court hearings, shouting and wearing shirts that read "Free Karen Reed." Sensitive to the O'Keefe family suffering, these people were not. One of the Reed supporters used the online pseudonym O'Keefe's Frozen Corpse. At a Hollywood party to raise money for Reed's legal defense, one attendee used makeup to recreate the same wounds O'Keefe had on his arm. The cake at the party appeared to be decorated like blood-soaked snow. I witnessed this scenario play out at a hearing on July 25th, 2023. When Reed showed up, her supporters showered her with a celebrity's welcome. When John's family arrived, they asked court officials to let them use an alternative entrance to avoid walking through the echoes of cheers for the woman accused of killing their son. The court denied the request, and when the victim's loved ones walked into the courthouse, the crowd erupted into jeers and taunts. Dazed, I gathered with John's family in the hall, While most of us were visibly shaken, Paul stayed remarkably calm. He stood expressionless, watching the crowd through the door, hands in his pocket, exuding a quiet strength that reminded me of his brother. After the hearing, Reed supporters once again shouted insults at us. Someone who recognized Paul as a close friend of Reed's parents even hollered the phrase, "cop killer," at him. While completely illogical, no one seemed to believe that John's own family murdered him. This is what Reed supporters labeled anyone who didn't believe she is innocent. And it's a term his family and I have had to desensitize ourselves to. I once asked Paul how he managed to show such remarkable restraint while under attack by Reed supporters. Quote, "They're misinformed, misguided, so I don't engage," unquote, he told me. At a subsequent hearing, the pro-Reed crowd, who seemed to keep increasing in number, once again harassed me, Paul, and other friends of John's who had showed up to support the family. The enraged crowd chanted, "Shame on you," in unison as we entered the courthouse. After the hearing, court officers warned us to refrain from exiting immediately, quote, "for our own safety," unquote. We waited, only to find the crowd was waiting too. We needed the protection of the state police to find our way to safety to our cars as the mob followed screaming, "Cop killers." Afterwards, I reconvened with John's friend and family at a restaurant, far from the chaos, to grapple with the surreal events that had just unfolded. Someone remarked that the scene was like something you'd see in a horror movie. The words brought back memories of John in the months following the loss of his sister, his brother-in-law, and his friend. At a time when it seemed as though the light in his eyes had all been extinguished, when people asked how he was coping, he'd answer that he'd tell himself that none of it was real. Quote, "It's only a movie," unquote. I remember he used to say, "It's only a movie." Making a difficult time even more harrowing, horrific pictures of John began to appear online. In one split-screen image, John's smiling face was juxtaposed with snow drenched in his blood. One of the most painful moments for John's family was when Turtle Boy's blog published leaked photos from the autopsy reports, allowing morbidly curious readers to gawk at one of John's most intimate and vulnerable moments. Meanwhile, Reed supporters became a fixture at every hearing as the case garnered national headlines. With Reed's image splashed across media outlets, only now she was depicted as the victim. The larger the crowds and the wider the media coverage, the more it seemed as though John's legacy was fading into obscurity, while the public celebrated the supposed innocence of the woman accused of murdering him. That, for the family, has been the most enduring pain of all. In all this chaos, it feels like John's been forgotten, Paul recently said to me, and the person who stands accused of killing my brother is now being treated like the victim. So that's not unusual in these campaigns. You've been following my channel. As I write this in the run-up to Reed's trial, which at press time was set to begin in mid-April, I can sense the frustration among John's family and friends. We've grown tired of playing prosecutor outside of court. We've been forced to continually dispel the defense team's claims with concrete facts to strangers and even friends. We've watched expressions shift, when we succinctly explained the impossibility of what Reed's attorneys and supporters claim, that John was attacked by acquaintances and their family dog, who then dumped John outside to die with no concern for human life or legal culpability before returning to a house party, and somehow managed to swear an unbreakable oath of silence with 9 other guests who willingly obliged to let an innocent man freeze to death in a blizzard after a merciless beating, thereby becoming accomplices to murder themselves. To pull this off, we explained over and over the assailants would have needed the participation of numerous collaborators both during and after the incident, becoming one of the most intricately complex and audacious cover-ups in recent history, concocted spontaneously amid a night of revelry and drinking. My guess is that only a handful of the many people following this case have actually watched the hearings, during which prosecutor Adam Lally has consistently, calmly, and introvertly dismantled each fragment of Reed's defense. The public doesn't seem to take the time to read the actual court documents. The idea of conspiracy is apparently far more interesting than the facts. Over time, though, our crusade is to spread the truth has taken its toll on all of us. It's robbed us of moments we could have spent focusing on John's memory and keeping it alive. So we make it a point to share remembrances of John with one another. We text each other photos of John throughout the years and reminisce in person when we can. Recently, I was standing in John's kitchen with his mother, Peg, looking at the photos on the refrigerator of John and the kids. It brought me back to a day when John called me not long after his brother-in-law had died. John told me he was coming over because he had something he wanted to tell me. When he arrived, he plopped down on my couch, took a breath, and said, "I'm taking the kids. I think people doubt I will see it through because I'm a bachelor, but I'm going to raise them as my own." We talked about what life would look like. Then he asked 2 simple questions. "So what do I feed them? And what time do they go to bed?" He laughed heartily at himself before saying, "Seriously though, let's hear more about this potty training stuff." In the years that followed, it was a joy and an honor to watch John transform into a parent. He relished taking his girl to dance recitals and attending his boys' baseball game, building a home for and with the children, reignited the light in his eyes. It was their love that brought John back to life after the loss he suffered before his own life was violently snatched away. Today, there is a core group of John supporters that have attended every hearing and are determined to love and support his family as he would have done for us. At each court date, we brace ourselves for the inevitable harassment by the many Reed supporters who never knew John and don't even know Reed. In the early days, we were shaken and appalled, yet as the trial approaches, we're no longer rattled. Empowered by the truth, we march past the crowd with our heads held high as they shout expletives at us. We are confident that the defense team's case is built on a house of cards, and all it will take is a gust of truth to knock it down. On occasion, after a court hearing, a small group of John's friends will go out for a drink with Paul. We toast to John, to justice. Paul places a Bud Light on the bar for John every time. Others like me have begun adopting this small tribute too. We share memories and stories of better days gone by. Paul imitates John's signature walk, and we all laugh because he always nails it. Laughter gives way to tears, and we take turns falling apart, hugging through the moment. One day, a group of us visited John's grave. taking turns to say our prayers. I watched Paul place one hand on the headstone of his brother and the other on the headstone of his sister. He crouched between them, lowering his head. He wasn't just praying. He was re-establishing the connection between the three siblings who shared not just a name, but a genuine friendship. It was heartbreaking to see. We were supposed to grow old together, Paul said. Watch our children grow, our grandchildren grow, take care of our parents. When I asked what he missed about John, he tells me, I miss my other life partner. He was the pillar of this family. Etched into his gravestone is the phrase John himself repeated after his own losses. It's only a movie. It is something we all wish were true, but no, is not. As I stood at the grave of one of the best humans I had ever known, I thought of the man behind the headlines. His smile, laugh, wit, kindness, and loyalty. His old school manners and talent for photobombing that we all miss so much. I said a silent prayer to John and for John. I prayed for justice. I prayed this will be over soon, so his family can finally begin a process that the circus around John's death has denied them the chance to grieve in peace. That's what I have for today. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this episode. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm sorry I had to move it due to technical issues. But I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Hopefully it'll be on Prince Andrew. If not, it'll be moved to Monday. But I'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave me a 5-star review. And I'll see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night, everybody.